Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu.
Alaikum assalam, Brother Yahya. How are you keeping?
Alhamdulillah. Good to be back with you, Brother Ibrahim.
So, inshallah, it's recording now. We've got a couple of different tools we might talk a little bit about later. This Read
Inshallah.
AI business, but I didn't hear the recording has started, but it has started. Hey.
Allahu Akbar. Yes, it has.
All right, let's get into it. So we have a couple of things we wanted to share on based on last time. We spoke a little bit about our travels and the different things that we came across. And I think we've got a couple of exciting initiatives that are happening in Malaysia next week. Yahya, do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Or not
Yes.
next week? Oh, it is next week. SubhanAllah, that's come up so
Yes.
quick.
Yes, it is here at the end of Rabi al-Awwal, 1446, which corresponds to the 30th of September to October 3rd. We will be in Malaysia. The Global Association of Islamic Schools will be holding the third annual retreat and conference. And this year, the theme is Revival Rooted in Tradition, inshallah. So to say a few words about this, Brother Ibrahim, the GAIS, I was privileged to be one of the founding members and attended the first retreat in Turkey. Last year, they met in Durban, South Africa. I was unable to attend, but this year I'll be back. And this is a really important gathering at a very crucial time in the state of our ummah. Even the title here is really quite interesting to reflect on: revival rooted in tradition. And that gets at a number of topics that we hope to explore in this podcast, Educare, really looking at the roots of the roots of the roots of everything that we're doing.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So maybe just for the sake of myself and for everyone listening, what sort of, because there's always going to be these different institutions and groups that will arise. So my question would be, what prompted the formation of this particular institute, and what was it like in Turkey? I was visiting a school in Perth about a year ago, and they were talking about how they just got back from South Africa. Yeah, what's the history of it so far? Before we get into this year's topic, let's have a look into what is it all about.
Sure. Well, we might take a trip back to 1977 at the first World Conference on Muslim Education held in Mecca, with the likes of Dr. Saeed Muhammad Al-Attas and Saeed Ali Ashraf, gathering there to create a vision for the future of Islamic education. And there were some landmark papers and books published, and it was really a watershed moment. In fact, one of my first introductions to Islamic education was reading the essay on the philosophy of Islamic education by Sayyid Al-Attas, who's now in his 90s. We are actually hoping to meet with him in Malaysia if he is well enough to have a small delegation speak with him. But so that conference, if you go back to that and look at some of those outcomes, one of them, which I recall as recommendation M, was the formation of a global association of Islamic schools. That was something they had envisioned in 1977, but it wasn't until some 40 years later that effort came to fruition. There were other attempts, of course, but this was the first real global effort to bring together Islamic school educators and schools and really learn what is everyone doing and how can we build solidarity, how can we support each other, and how can we really revive our educational systems.
Well, subhanallah. I think if I may shed a couple of where my head went to or where my soul went to, as you said that. I mean, the word revival and renewal obviously means that something's not working.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting for us to pinpoint that um for even having this podcast, this Educere.Podcast, I would say goes to show that we are not satisfied with the way things are being done. There is something that's happening in different schools in different contexts to even allow for such a conversation to happen. And if I may just share a couple of thoughts, Brother Yahya, maybe with everyone, so that I guess we're all speaking the same language. Even if you were to look at how the environmental crisis actually became a crisis, it became a crisis because of the modern world advancing certain things, the technology, the disconnect from God, the disconnect from the sacred. When the modern world developed in such a way where it almost left the metaphysics, left God, left anything to do with our spiritual dimension, the earth suffered as a result. So when we're talking about the environment and we're talking about saving the environment, this discourse on language and us reading the world this way happened because of the modern world and the advancements of the modern world. And for those who aren't too familiar, the modern world isn't, it doesn't mean like today's society. It's certain ideas rooted in a way of reading and understanding the world. So I think that's very interesting to even just put out. I'm just thinking out loud here. It seems like we want to revive and renew education because, as you know, education is a modern concept. This idea of having a different space and we're going to educate individuals, it's very foreign to the pre-modern traditions where souls were nurtured and developed in the very fabric of society. So with the introduction of K to 12 education, and as you saw with your American old syllabuses, there was this concept of a soul, there was this concept of ethics. But as the neoliberal discourse put pressure on policies, which put pressure on institutions, it seems like to me that we now have a problem that was created because of modernity, and that now we are trying to address as with the Islamic tradition, because we believe the tradition has a lot to offer, not just for Muslims, but for all the issues and the crises we see currently. So that was just where my head went, Brother Yahya. Like we're starting to see the fruits of Francis Bacon, Descartes, and all these, I guess, modern thinkers that birthed the modern world and created modern world problems, such as the rising. We were talking about the two loop theory in our first episode. The decline of this system of education that had so many promises for a better future, promises for a better America. That's what came to my mind. Promises for affordable housing, happy lives. But we don't see it to be the case at the moment, Brother Yahya. So that's sort of where my mind went. I'd be very interested to see what were the outcomes of the first two Global Association of Islamic Schools. Did they come to tackle the modern world in its predicament?
Well, I think the first step was really a coming together and, as one colleague said, finding out what has everyone been working on. We've been working in a lot of isolation. And so, as he put it, finding the square pegs and the round pegs and finding where they each fit in. For example, there was a school we learned about in Nigeria that had this amazing Tazkia program for staff and for students that they've been developing for 20 years. So it's kind of coming together of sharing all these resources. But I think your question is an important one because now we need to look in what are the action steps. Many people are still playing in this traditional framework of education that we need to break out of. And so even within the GAIS, another project was something I worked on called the Ihya Fellowship, which was trying to bring together the really innovative forward-thinking schools, and I would say backward-thinking too, in the sense of going back to the roots and back to the fitra, with a focus of how can we help show that another way is possible. And as we discussed, I think last time, why was it at one point in our tradition that we were producing these transformed souls that were leading every field of knowledge? So what can we take from that, and what can we take from modern pedagogy too, and what are some of these action steps we need to start taking? So that's what I'm really looking forward to out of this conference. Is now this is our third coming together. What are some of these concrete projects and action steps that we can all take in our local environments, wherever that may be? I'm in Dubai, you're in Australia. We have now, I think, over 300 members from 30 countries. So it's this great coming together. But then, like you said, it's what are those action steps that we're going to take to start moving into that second loop and really transforming our programs and our schools, inshallah.
Yeah, let's see what's to come of it. I know one of my PhD supervisors, his name is Muhammad Rustam, mashallah, does a lot of great work in the different fields. He's attending a conference in Berlin. He shared with me a couple of the information via an email the other day, and probably worthwhile just mentioning it here. And inshallah, something that we can maybe we can even invite him onto the podcast. Why not? Let's see if we can pull that in. That's a shameless plug for a future episode if Allah wills it. But what the conference is, and it's a very interesting one. If I pull it up here, brother Yahya, I need to find it. It's in Berlin, and it's got to do with, I found it. Bismillah. It's called the Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi's Conference in Today's Education, Rethinking Methodologies. So I think something that is starting to, I guess, come out in the sense of renewal is that we've had a shift as in the modern day pedagogy where we're always very science based. Observe this, write the hypotheses, write what you saw, and then rinse and repeat. Whereas traditionally, as humans, we were very much based around stories and poetry. So I would love to see what the outcome of this conference is, and maybe tied in with the conference that you're attending. In that renewal is going to be based in thinking and rethinking about our assumptions about what the real world is all about. Because if let's say we're talking about renewal, and we're going to be like, you know what, Brother Yahya and I, let's start to do things more Islamic, but we're doing it in a framework that the assumptions and the building blocks of that framework have certain understandings about the world that work against what we're trying to do. So, for example, if me and you are like, let's make things Islamic, make things holistic, let's provide some healing to the soul, and then we're trying to do it in a framework or a context where everyone's stressing out about tests, English, numeracy, etc. We're working against ourselves, really. So I think it's about really renewing and reviving our whole ways of doing things. And that also means taking the good from modern day pedagogies, because wisdom is the lost property of a believer, as you know, the narration goes, and applying it in our context, as you rightly said. So I'm excited for this Rumi conference. I'm excited for the outcomes of the GAIS. I would have loved to join you, but I'm in Perth, inshallah, with the community there. So inshallah, next time would be quite amazing.
Inshallah. There's a lot of good things happening. And this, for me, is a sign of this revival really starting. And we all have a part to play. I think of a line from Wendell Berry, who's the environmentalist and philosopher from southern US. And he talked about the work of planet saving will require many, many, many people. And it's not going to make any one person famous or rich. But as long as it involves love, it will be immensely rewarding work. And I see that with this as well, because one of my favorite things about these conferences, as you know, is that it creates when people are coming with this intention of sincerity, of doing this work for the sake of Allah, then it creates a barakah zone there. And some of the most amazing insights, conversations, experiences that I have had have happened outside of the formal conference. It's been coffee after Fajr, a walk under the whirling stars. So these kind of things happen when we come together in person, that Allah creates these insights, these openings in these spaces. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. I mean, if you look at the lineup too, and we can post this, it's going to have 3 tracks on leadership, academic research, and something for heads of Islamic schools, and then also pre-conferences on reading and an international teacher training. So a lot of good formal things happening, but I'm also looking forward to those in between sessions and openings that can come that really inspire us and give us that motivation to go back to our communities and really, as I put in one of the poems, put down our buckets where we are and get to work, because there's a lot of work ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I just pulled up the PDF on my phone, so I'm just having a quick glance through it, and really we have some really interesting keynote speakers, among them Dr. Samir Mahmood, who I have the pleasure of learning from as well. And I'm not really familiar with the other brothers, to be honest with you, Brother Yahya. Maybe you can shed some light on all the esteemed speakers and what they're talking about. I mean, the topics are quite interesting. Revival rooted in tradition. That was Professor Dr. Wan Muhammad Noor. Dr. Samir is talking about nurturing the whole human being, reflections on educational revival rooted in tradition. Our own Dr. Nadeem Memon is speaking on revival rooted in tradition, collective dialogue on implications, opportunities, and aspirations. Lots of very interesting and quite, to be honest, exciting topics that are being discussed by the Yahya.
Yeah, inshallah. And I think, the first step, and you'll notice that Dr. Nadeem is facilitating a dialogue in his session, which I think is really important as we look at this work of shifting hearts and minds. It requires this kind of deep discussion that I hope will take place here, both in these formal sessions and out of it. And some of the names you may not recognize because they're known more in their kind of local
For sure.
schools and countries. But that's the exciting thing, is that we're learning about these amazing projects that are happening that we can all build upon and benefit from. So I do hope there'll be some recordings available, and there'll also be some presentations, I think, from the Cambridge Dialogues, which was that gathering of academics, scholars, and practitioners that I was fortunate to be part of last year. They'll be releasing some of the papers that have come that I think will really help set a roadmap for this renewal work, inshallah.
No, inshallah, sounds exciting. Looking forward to it. I also know that you've been working on, so that sort of closes out GAIS item. I'm looking forward to touching base with you. When you're in Malaysia, actually, we might benefit from your reflections. You recently shared a paper with me, Brother Yahya, about the Iqra initiative that you've been working on. Um, Personally, I think we don't read enough. I personally don't read enough, as much as I should be. And I feel like everyone sort of has that reflection. So maybe tell us a little bit about maybe something a bit more practical that we could talk about. What's your Iqra initiative all about?
Sure. So this is my small and humble effort to do something that I have always been passionate about, and try to address a growing concern and need, which is exactly what you said, that people have stopped reading. Now, when I first embraced Islam 8 years ago, of course, I learned that the first word that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Iqra, read, read in the name of your Lord. And I was in Saudi at the time, and I found that no one was reading in the school. No one had a book. In the land of Iqra, there was an absence of reading of Iqra. And that for me was really sad. I told this to a colleague of mine, and this brother, who is the head of academic of Arabic, of the Arabic program, an academic leader in the school, and he shared a story about his own son who had been in the US, developed a love of reading, came back to Saudi, and then was bullied to the point that he stopped reading at school and stopped bringing books into school.
Oh
And
my God.
that really affected me, a traumatic experience, because I grew up reading. I grew up in a reading family. I visited the library probably once a week, and that was the culture I was in. But here I was in a very different space where reading was not part of the culture, either in the school or at home. And I did a survey before I started this Iqra initiative, and I asked students a number of questions based on the reading motivation survey. So I actually ended up doing my master's research on reading motivation and engagement. So a lot of that is informed, that work informs this initiative. But I used that survey and I asked a number of questions. And one of them was even, how many books do you have at home, physical books? And a shocking percentage had zero, other than the Quran. They had zero books at home. And another question that was interesting was, how often do you see your parents reading? Again, a shockingly high percentage of very low percentage that saw their parents reading. So I realized this was going to need to be a community initiative. And after that survey, I started to, based on my research, I started to look at, okay, how can we create a culture of reading in our school and community? So the program is really based on that work. And I did a number of experiments, then COVID hit, so we had to do a lot of things online. And then in the last year, I really developed the program with a team at my school, NGS, because the board had asked us to do just this, develop a culture of reading in the school. So just very briefly, there are three, it's a very simple program. There's three focus areas. One is, how do we create more opportunities for reading in the school day? How do we develop a range of activities that are going to motivate and engage students to read? And then how do we build a reading environment that is here in the school, at home, and in the wider community?
So really, we're creating opportunities. We're
Mm-hmm.
engaging, we're trying to engage students to read, and then building the reading environment at home, which is, I guess, the three-step approach for anyone, really. So what opportunities are you making? How are you engaging them? And then what are you doing to building the environment? I love it. I think this is brilliant. So how has it gone so far at your school? I know some of the actions you did in the weekly schedule involved a dear time. So drop everything and read, which is like maybe like 15 minutes or so of reading. Just read anything, any book that you come across. The morning read aloud, so reading out loud for like 10 minutes, having some reading spaces. I think that was very interesting that I saw. And then the engagement, I liked how you had having the author of the month and visiting authors. So trying to create this culture of authors actually visiting the schools and the classrooms, which I think is fantastic. But I think the one that probably for me, the one that I found to be probably the most interesting was the suggestions for home, because schools cannot do what families don't do. And if we try to create a culture of reading at school, it might be disliked by people. Like, hey, I don't want to do this, it's a school thing. But if everyone's doing it, then if you don't do it, you'd be the odd one out. So I think
That's
it's
it.
brilliant.
That's it. And I'll tell you, one family out of this program, they started every Sunday having just a 1 hour silent reading time as a family, right? They turned off all the devices, they sat, read their books for 1 hour, and sometimes even just 30 minutes, and then they would discuss as a family. And that really brought them together. Another family did their own home read alouds, right? So the kids in the family would practice reading aloud to each other. And then the other thing that we do that's been the most successful is the Tuck Me In Tuesday, which is a global read aloud. And tomorrow we'll actually be doing a session in the Turkish language. So this has reached a point now where we have a global audience that joins this session, and we have 1 week in English, 1 week in Arabic. Now the third week we're going to start adding other languages like Urdu, Turkish, Chinese, whatever language we can find someone to read on. And then we'll have a week as well of oral storytelling. So I have lined up a group of oral storytellers. And again, this is a part of the revival of our tradition, as you mentioned earlier, storytelling, stories that help us reflect on our own lives and give us guidance. So there are a lot of things here that any school, any family could adopt. And I'm happy to, anyone interested to share more and welcome folks to join the Tuck Me In Tuesday or to start one in your own school and community.
Absolutely. So maybe the challenge for ourselves. I mean, I have to read a lot for my PhD anyways, and that involved my iPad, my Kindle, along with all the other books, to be honest, Brother Yahya. So I sort of carry it around with me wherever I can. But maybe here's the challenge for everyone, and I'll give maybe some tips for myself and maybe for yourself too, Brother Yahya, in that we are going to, inshallah, start reading more, and not just oh yeah, I'm going to do that, but actually dedicate some time. So what I think that could look like is at 7 p.m. every night as a family or as an individual for 15 minutes, set that timer. I'm going to read anything and everything. And for me, what helps me, Brother Yahya, is that I know some people, some of the friends and the brothers that I talk to, around reading. They usually say, it's very hard to read a book, it's hard to get through it, etc. And I just told them this simple idea that really changed a lot of people. I said, why do you have this need to finish to read like this book? I
Mm.
said, if you're not liking it, let it go and experience the book. And there's so many reads that I revisit often and again and again. And although I've read it, one of the books I saw yesterday was The Garden of Truth by Sayyid Hussein Nasser. And I read that book when I was like 17. I remember the impact it had on me. I picked it up yesterday and I read through it because I was putting together some workshop for my visit to Perth next week. And I was like, SubhanAllah, I don't think I've ever read this. So for me, Brother Yahya, the thing that I think I'd share with everyone to help them as they try to build this initiative is that experience books like you experience a forest. You're
Mm.
not there to look at every single leaf. You'll miss some leaves. You'll miss some caterpillars. You'll miss some butterflies. You'll hear some birds chirping, but you might not see them. But don't try to look for a bird that you cannot see, and don't stay and analyze a leaf when there's a whole forest in front of you. So go through a walk through the forest, enjoy the reading, enjoy whatever it is that you are experiencing. And some people have, I used to have this need to memorize everything and to remember everything. Who says you have to? Enjoy
Mm.
it, experience it, take what you will. Until now, I'm trying to stop writing notes for everything that I enjoy. But take what you will and then move on. And if you want to put a book down, put it down. If you want to pick something else up, pick it up. And try to read. You can read a whole book in 15 minutes. You can read a whole book in a couple of years. Someone was like,
Mm.
how's that possible? Especially my kids. I can imagine them hearing this and be like, oh, how can you read a book? I said, you don't need to read every single word, but tell me what you got in 15 minutes. So those are some of my strategies, Brother Yahya. I hope they're helpful to the readers.
Jazakallah
What are
khair.
some strategies you have?
Well, the first reminder is that we don't forget about the book of books where Iqra was revealed. And I'm holding up here the Quran, that we have to
I'm
make
guilty
time for
of that.
this. Yes, and
I'm
this is a
guilty of
reminder
that,
to
Brother Yahya.
reminder to myself first. Remember, each letter is an ajr, alif, lam, mim. So we have to prioritize our Quran reading first and foremost. And then, as you said, setting aside even these 15 minutes a day, because we know that what is pleasing to Allah is small acts, are small acts done consistently. And that's why the Iqra has taken off here, because every Tuesday we do that. We have the morning read aloud, we have the dear time, we have the Tuck Me In Tuesday, and we've tried to be very consistent in these things. So if you can get in it on an individual level and then on a communal level, that will really help you set this as a habit and a discipline that will also bring in rewards, because we know that's part of our duty as Muslims, is to seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, as far as China in one narration. So this is our task as Muslims. And in this way, we can begin that work of revival, because we need to start being knowledge producers again, not just consumers of what you were talking about, of the kind of waste products of Western civilization and modernity and post-modernity. That's what we're
Yeah.
consuming. We need to start being producers, but first we need to be consuming the right things ourselves so that we can produce something of beauty, of remembrance, of transformation.
Yeah. And if I may, Brother Yahya, one, I guess, mystical note to just, I guess, dazzle on this cream or this ice cream that we're sort of enjoying right now. So a bit of chocolate sauce and ice cream always goes good. Is that when we are seeking knowledge, this is a form of seeking perfection, and this is really seeking God. So the God in the Islamic tradition, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you know, is ultimate knowledge, al-alim, ultimate beauty, ultimate perfection. So when we are seeking to know, really we are seeking God through the ways He shows Himself to us.
I lost you there for a moment, but you're
Okay,
back. Alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah, where did it
You
stop?
you you
What happened
drifted
last
into the
time?
ether. Those words are now somewhere in another realm. I don't know who they're going to reach, but I could sense the essence of them just through the nur from your face. MashaAllah.
You know how it is, Brother Yahya. Silence is God's language. So I think I wasn't meant to say anything else. Alhamdulillah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Well, perhaps that's a good note to close on is this mystical nature of sohbah, spiritual conversation and spiritual connection. And this is what we're doing here.
Technical,
Yes.
technical difficulties.
Well, you can call it what you want. You can call it what you want. It was part of the qadr
Hey,
of
look,
today's episode.
I do believe that wholeheartedly as well. So inshallah, whatever comes out of it comes out of it. Whatever didn't come out of it wasn't meant to reach us. Subhanallah.
Subhanallah. Alhamdulillah.
All right. Any final
Alhamdulillah.
closing thoughts, brother Yahya, for the 2 points that we were talking about today?
Well, as the Adhan sounds there, I'm just reminded again that we constantly have to prioritize our deen, and all of the answers will come through that. I believe Allah will make it easy, all of the tasks for us, if we can prioritize our Islam. So that's the reminder that's coming to me at the moment. And I'm just looking down here about our podcast where we had this line I was trying to remember from last episode, which you remembered, about inspiring renewed thinking about education through honest conversation and deep reflection that we hope will then turn into amal, action.
Action. Yeah. Because we can talk about polishing the heart as much as we want, but unless the action of polishing the heart occurs, we will never be able to reflect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the divine beauty. So I would say my closing thought is literally that. Let us learn that which is beneficial, and that which is beneficial only happens through transformation, which is action. So if you were inspired by the Global Annual of Islamic Schools, please do seek out what that is about, or any conference about renewing education through storytelling. And then please, I'm talking to myself here when I listen to this in the future. If you heard about reading, please go pick up the Holy Quran and pick up a book and start reading and reflecting, so that inshallah we can witness the transformation that occurs, inshallah.
Ameen. Ya Rab.
All right, brother Yahya. We'll inshallah see you next time, where we inspire through honest conversation and deep reflection, hope to renewal. I know I butchered that, but alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.
Bismillah.
Brother Yahya, we back?
We're back. We're back.
Man, our post convo was so good. I wanted to share some of the thinking with our listeners. So I'll just pick off where we went off, and then we'll close it very quickly, inshallah. So my Ustad Samir Muhammad Rustam, he had written a poem where he says along the lines of, a Muslim name but secular mind produces not knowledge of an Islamic kind. And this is what I guess we were actually unpacking the GAIS and seeing any sort of group that comes together, what makes it Islamic. And I guess it would be very important to just share reflections candidly on this podcast. I hope I don't get cancelled from the GIS. Brother Yahya, you're one of the founding members. But the
I'll be
thinking is,
defending you. Don't worry.
God bless you, brother Yahya. But the thinking is quite serious. When we come together as a group, the group becomes its own entity, if you like. And if this is coming from within a secular framework and an inferiority complex within the people that exist in that group, might birth knowledge that's not Islamic or not holistic or not around God and the perfection of humanity and mankind. What does that mean? It means maybe a group comes together and they bring forth, like you had mentioned, someone who is not rooted in tradition, who will speak to other people in the room about leadership, about well-being, about whatever it is. They themselves might be Muslim. They themselves might have a Muslim name, who read the Quran, who are attending the masjid. But if their mind is secular, their knowledge they produce will be at best second or third tier. So I wanted to share that with everyone, that yes, we said there are great things happening on different fronts, but at the same time, we had to be quite candid and realistic, that everyone's open to critique. Even this podcast, Educere, it's not that any critique would be against myself or yourself, but we're individuals and we show lots of love to everyone. But there are ideas that we might share that might be wrong, or that might be our where we're thinking at the time and how we're going to go forward. And I think this is the raw reflection I wanted to share with everyone, because it sounded like we were really promoting the GIS, which part of it's true. I like the tradition. The theme is great. but it's not without its critique. So I don't know. We'll give you 2 seconds to finalize that, brother Yahya, as well.
Jazakallah khair. Well, that's our tradition, right? It's seeking al-haq. And that needs to be our ultimate aim with anything. And we have to challenge things with that intention. And that's the sincerity of seeking knowledge for the sake of Allah. So if we really want to start producing beneficial knowledge again, then we need to do this deep seated investigation of our sources. And that was the aim of this podcast, to help awaken ourselves to that reality and others as well, so that we really can plant seeds in the most fertile soil, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. So that's our post episode little reflection ending. So we love all our listeners. All love comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowledge from Allah. And I think it was important to share this. So thank you for your extra 2-3 minutes that you gave us your ears to our dear listeners.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, brother.
Jazakallah
Take care
khair.
again. Hopefully no post. Salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.